It's mailbag time. We'll talk about the timing on Clayton Kershaw, where Dalton Rushing ought to play to start the season, the state of the Dodgers pitching staff, and a lot more. Let's get live on Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks to our everydayers for making us your first listen every weekday morning. And thanks to those of you who are with us live here on Monday evening. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. If this is your first time with us, my name is Jeff Snider. That guy next to me is my co-host, Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like most of you. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room, so we bring you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. And Vince, we're getting closer and closer to spring training. We are now just, a little over 2 weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting, which is crazy. The offseason always feels too long, but it feels a little bit less too long this year just because it's been a happy offseason and, by definition, shorter offseason than most other teams had. So, but either way, short or long, I'm ready for spring training.
Yeah, it's one of those where long season, you end it the way you want it to end, and you're like, okay, cool, like get to relax a little bit. You know, the Dodgers really didn't give us a chance to relax. They continued to sign guys throughout the off season, and still maybe a couple guys left to be signed. And now we're here, spring training, 2 weeks away. A month after that, they'll be in Japan playing games that matter, and then 10 days after that, they'll be here getting their rings and starting the regular season domestically. So it seemed very fast this time.
Yeah, you and I definitely enjoyed basking in the glory of the World Series victory. But they did do so much to get us excited for 2025 that we're kind of in, I can't wait for the season to start mode. And that's probably a good situation to be in. Today's episode is going to be a mailbag episode. No roster moves on Monday, other than the Dodgers announced a total of 29 international free agent signings. When you consider that they gave more than their entire allotment of pool money to Roki Sasaki, the fact that they were able to sign 28 other players, obviously they traded for some pool money, and players who signed for under a certain amount don't count towards the pool money, so you can sign as many of those as you want. But it seems like the Dodgers got a good mix of, obviously the best player signed in Roki Sasaki and some higher level prospects and a lot of lower level prospects who a lot of times those guys pan out too, especially in the Dodgers development system. So, Roki Sasaki is the only name that any of us will recognize at this point. But who knows what we'll be thinking about 4 or 5 years down the road with these guys.
Yeah, that's the toughest part with a lot of these signings. You're signing these kids, they're making commitments at age 15, they're signing at age 16, and you don't know how the next 2 years is going to go, the next 4 years is going to go, even the next 6, 8 years is going to go. And I'm sure we'll be saying at least one of those names here in the next 5 years or so.
Yeah. So we are jumping into a mailbag episode. We took questions from you listeners on Twitter and in our insiders group. If you want to become a Locked On Dodgers insider, just go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. Our first question does come from one of our insiders, Steve Farowich, who lives up in Washington now. He says, for the sake of the 40-man roster, why not just wait until June or whenever to sign Clayton Kershaw?
Yeah, if I might be mistaken here, which I don't think I am, but he wouldn't be able to have access to any of the Dodgers facilities and doctors and coaches and all that type of stuff. And the Dodgers aren't necessarily hurting for 40-man roster spots once they are able to open some up due to the 60-day IL. So. Yeah,
that's the big thing is, right now it feels like a roster crunch because their 40-man roster is full, but it won't be full. There will be plenty of room for Kershaw and, whoever else they decide to sign once spring training actually starts in a couple weeks. And the other thing is, in addition to the facilities, just being with the team. We know that Kershaw likes to be with the team. We haven't really heard any official word on when they will make that signing official. So maybe it will be later when he's a little bit more ready But I would guess it will be during spring training because I know he likes to be with the team, and being signed but injured kind of is the best of both worlds for him at that point. He can be with the team when he wants to. He can be with his family when he wants to. And obviously,
even he can go on the 60-day too. So
yeah. Really, they would have to clear a spot for him. But like, say for example, if they were going to sign Kiké, Hernandez, and Clayton Kershaw, they would just put somebody, Gavin Stone, pick a name out of a hat, Gavin Stone on the 60-day IL, sign Kershaw, immediately transfer him to the 60-day IL, opens that roster spot up to sign the next guy, which we thought they would do last year, and then they ended up doing it in a different order because, we never know what the Dodgers have in store. But, there will definitely be plenty of roster spots, especially when, like you said, if they're not expecting him in the first 2 months of the season, he can go on the 60-day, or even the first month of the season, he can go on the 60-day IL as soon as they sign him. So.
Yeah, hopefully we don't get a surprise at FanFest this year. Last year at FanFest, when we found out Nick Frosto was out for the year after having surgery. So hopefully there's not too many guys of that nature left to have surgery to undergo. But, we'll see what happens. But hopefully that's not something we hear.
Yeah, hopefully no bad surprises.
Yeah.
Our next – did you have something else?
No, I was going to ask a question.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Vince.
Yeah. Our next one comes from Scott Bryson. Mentioned how we talked a little bit about the young guys in the Dodgers organization and how they feel about being prospects. He says as prospects become more and more blocked, thinking more about the pitchers. Do we wish, or do they wish, that they were somewhere else?
Yeah, and it's probably different for every pitcher. And we have had opportunities over the years to talk to a lot of guys when they were in the minors, and they all say the same thing. I just focus on doing my job. I remember when we talked to Cody Bellinger when he was in the minor leagues. And at that point, he was mostly a first baseman. And, we asked him, when you see Adrian Gonzalez go down with an injury, do you think, hey, this is my spot? And he said, you don't really think about that. You just kind of try to do your thing. But that's what people say on a podcast. I assume that there is a certain level of pitcher who can see the writing on the wall and recognize that, yeah, I'm probably not going to get a shot to be in the starting rotation for the Dodgers anytime soon. And so, yeah, they probably are looking forward to either getting traded or, becoming a free agent or the Rule 5 draft or something to get them. But also, if you do your part, then there comes a point where the Dodgers have to put you on the 40-man roster or risk losing you in the Rule 5 draft. And so even if you are kind of looking to get traded, your best chance for that is to pitch as well as possible or play as well as possible in the minor leagues. And so I do think that for the most part, while in their insecure moments, in their private moments, they do probably think about the roster logjam. I think mostly they are really focused on, I got to play my best so that somebody, either the Dodgers or somebody else, will put me in their rotation, will put me in their lineup, because that is how you get to the big leagues. And it's how they got to AA or AAA to start with, was by performing at the high school level, at the college level, wherever it was, and doing your best and trusting that the spot will open up for you.
Yeah, I would imagine it's some guys see it, can see the writing on the wall or see what's ahead of him and be like, you know what, maybe I would be better served for me personally in a different position or a different team. And there's probably some guys that say, well, I'm on the Dodgers. And, Ben Kasperius is a good one. Like, you look at what he needed to happen last year in order for him to get a chance and in order for him to get a spot on the playoff roster and World Series roster. And, we asked him, like, is this something you ever even dreamed about heading into the season? And, realistically, he was probably not. But I knew that, I had to do my work and they had told me this and everything else. And, well, from what we've heard, the Dodgers are transparent. That's something we've always heard. We haven't really heard anything negative from guys traded. So I would imagine that, yeah, you kind of like Michael Busch. He wasn't too good for AAA, not necessarily didn't have a position or wasn't good enough, or Freddie Freeman signing kind of messed him up a little bit. He probably could have slid in and been a first baseman. And at that point last year, he might have thought like, okay, do I want to play on a good team or, maybe something happens. And that's what happened. He got traded. He had a good season, but on a team that didn't make the playoffs. And now maybe they make it this year, and he has a little bit of future and everything else. We've seen a lot of guys go on to have success on other teams. We've seen a lot of guys go on and not have success on other teams. And I think it all just comes down to personally how you feel. Like right now, if you're, one of these young guys, Mac and Kisperius and all those type of guys, you're probably thinking, well, I have a World Series title. So now, like, if trade did open up and I'm a number 2, 3, 4 starter in another rotation, that wouldn't be the worst thing for me personally. But they also could be thinking, I like winning. I like being part of this. And even if I get to be a small part of it, I'm still part of it. So.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to both sides. But that $750,000 league minimum, I think there's a lot of guys who would love to be getting their $750 from the Pirates rather than getting their $30,000 a year playing in Oklahoma City. So
yeah, true that.
We've got a lot more questions that we'll get into. So thanks for making us your first listen, and please keep it locked on Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. As you know, I love sports, I love concerts, I love comedy shows. The thing they all have in common is buying tickets, and that means the other thing they have in common is you can find the best price on Game Time. Now Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I've used Game Time to buy game tickets and parking passes at the Dodger game several times. Went to a Utah Jazz game a few weeks ago. Used Game Time to see my favorite comedian, Nate Bargatze, live. Even to go see the Harlem Globetrotters last year. I always check all the other sites, but I have never yet been able to call on the Game Time guarantee because they always just give me the best prices, just like they promise. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets to your favorite events with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Hey, we are back. Thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Thanks for being an everydayer if you are. If you're not an everydayer, it's easy to become one. Just watch or listen every weekday morning and make that easier on yourself by subscribing wherever you're watching or listening right now. Remember, you can go beyond the podcast and become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. Insiders get priority in our mailbag episodes. There's a Discord server where you can talk with the other insiders, text directly with us, one-on-one conversations, get our thoughts before the podcast, all that good stuff. So be sure to check that out. Also, for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by our buddy Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully. And be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the two 24/7 streaming channels on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network. And jumping back into our mailbag, a different Scott this time, another insider. This is Scott in Texas. He asked, what does the role for Dalton Rushing look like this year? Would he be better served getting regular playing time in Oklahoma City than a bench role in the majors?
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit yesterday, talking about the non-roster invitees. He'll be in big league camp to start the spring. And I said, even with a ridiculous spring training, I don't think he really has a legitimate chance to make the opening day roster without injuries. And if you're not on the opening day roster, or you're not, is he good enough to be on the roster? Yes. Does that make sense for the Dodgers to have their top hitting prospect or most major league ready hitting prospect sitting and playing maybe once or twice a week? No. At this point, he's kind of in one of those boats that we just talked about guys that are maybe blocked, where he's good enough to be in the majors more than likely, or at least get a shot at it. But at this point with the roster, the way it's constructed, he's better served for the Dodgers specifically, playing every day. Maybe, they said he was going to be a catcher, but, could play some outfield again. And, realistically, that's what makes the most sense.
Yeah, and especially when you factor in the fact that he is still learning the outfield. It would be one thing if he was just going to be a catcher, then, maybe if that was the case, they may not have signed Austin Barnes, brought him back again for this year. But the fact is, he is still trying to learn to be an outfielder to maximize his opportunities at the big league level. And that development is going to come from playing every day in AAA, at least until an opportunity presents itself, whether that is an injury to Austin Barnes or an injury in the outfield, in kind of I'm not going to say a perfect world, because this does involve somebody getting hurt. And so I don't want anybody to think I'm rooting for injury. But say, for example, Austin Barnes was to get hurt, then Dalton Rushing could come up and be the backup catcher and also get some playing time in the outfield. I think in the Dodgers' perfect world, that would probably happen at least a month or two into the season, so that Rushing has a little bit more time to get used to the outfield in the minors. But also, he's had all offseason, so it's possible that he shows up to spring training and he's actually a solid defensive left fielder, in which case that does open up more possibilities to where they can start thinking, oh, we could have an extra outfielder who's also our backup catcher. And it's like having a backup catcher who could actually use as a late inning pinch hitter is a luxury the Dodgers have not really had the last few years, because they've had Austin Barnes, who, yes, he has been a late inning pinch hitter a couple times, but not because of him, just because, Kevin Biggio was the alternative or something. But having somebody who can actually hit as your late inning pinch hitter. So if Rushing could get, 1 or 2 starts a week at catcher and 1 or 2 starts a week in left field and pinch hitting in the other game, situations where, whether it's, for whatever reason, I think that could be a possibility. But again, that would depend on Austin Barnes' health more than anything else.
Yeah. So, all right. Next question from Dan in Florida. Wants to know about Kirby Yates. Is it happening? Is it not happening? I know that I saw something in the Discord server about Bill Plunkett, so maybe I know you watched.
Yeah. Bill Plunkett was on with Clinton Alana on Dodgers territory, and Dan and I interpreted something Plunkett said differently, and I think that's where this question from Dan came from, because he's the one who brought it up in the Discord server too. What Plunkett said about Yates was kind of in the context of Clinton Alana asked him, "Are the Dodgers done?" And Plunkett said, "Are the Dodgers ever done?" And he said the word they like to use is opportunistic. And he said, for example, Kirby Yates. Do the Dodgers need Kirby Yates? No, but he's available, so why not? And so I think maybe Dan read a little too much into that, well, it hasn't happened. Only Bob Nightingale has reported it, and the Dodgers don't need him. And so, but I don't think Plunkett was saying the Dodgers aren't getting Yates. If anything, it was the opposite. It was like, well, yeah, we don't need him, but hey, he's a good reliever and he's available if he falls into their laps. And that's kind of how a lot of these things have happened. Freddie Freeman kind of fell into their laps. Obviously, they were interested in Freeman, but if the Braves don't cheap out on Freeman, the Dodgers never had a chance at Freddie Freeman. He eventually fell into their laps at a really reasonable price for a future Hall of Famer like Freddie Freeman. And they like deals like that, where guys do kind of price themselves, get priced out of the market and fall into their laps. And that seems to be the situation with Kirby Yates, although it does get curiouser and curiouser every day that we don't hear anything official. But again, the Dodgers don't have a 40-man roster spot for him right now.
Yeah, I mean, Nightingale was the only one that said it was a done deal. All the other reports were that it was nearing or finalizing or whatever the wording was, but they all mentioned the physical, and that's, probably if the Dodgers saw something they didn't like in the physical, maybe they're adjusting, talking, different numbers, incentives, all that type of stuff. But we haven't heard anything to the contrary, so at this point, I still believe Kirby Yates will be there eventually.
Yeah, there's no reason to think he's not going to be a Dodger. Next question from Insider Seth. What are the Dodgers' plans for starting pitching? None of our current starters have a ton of innings historically. Do we foresee picking up an innings eater, or will it be from the farm?
I could see them getting an innings eater. I don't think it's possible. I'm not possible. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think they're going to start the year with, Snell, Glasnow, Yamamoto at the top, the formidable three. And then, Roki will be in the mix for sure, because that's what they told us. And then you'll have to find what you're going to get out of Bobby Miller, Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin, and then you have Nat Casper. Like, there's enough arms to contribute enough innings. It's just a matter of the way they fill them in. And I do think, we've talked about the first month of the season, they have every Thursday off in April, and they have a Sunday off at the start of the season. So they can go with a 5-man rotation and maybe piggyback some guys in that 5th spot, or they can go with a 6-man rotation and guys are going to really be stretched out and have days off. There's a lot of ways for them to go, but I don't think right now, the way the roster is, I don't think they're hurting for innings. It might be a matter of, are they hurting for good innings, depending how Gonsolin and May are. And I think there's enough talent right now. It could change in the next couple of weeks, but if there's still enough talent out there on the market and they see, you know what, May and Gonsolin and all these guys maybe aren't looking how we want, then maybe they could go pick someone else up. But I do think they have enough arms with the offense they're going to have to, you know, get through and weather the storm or whatever the wording you want to use until Ohtani and all the other reinforcements get here.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's more of a timing thing. Just the fact that they, you know, Ohtani won't pitch for the first month or so of the season probably, and we haven't heard a definitive time frame on him. That's one of the reasons I'm excited for spring training to start, because it will start to get a better idea. We will see, you know, okay, is Ohtani throwing bullpens? You know, how does Dustin May look in the? But we're gonna, in the first 2 weeks after pitchers and catchers report, we're gonna get a lot of information about who we expect to be ready and everything, and then that at that point, then we'll have a better idea what the rotation will look like. But we know that Ohtani will pitch at some point in the season. We know that Clayton Kershaw will pitch for the Dodgers at some point in the season, you know, and we hope that Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin will. We hope that Landon Knack and Ben Kasperius and Justin Robleski, that those guys will get some time in the big leagues. But it really is more of a timing thing and figuring out, okay, you know, that phrase you use, weather the storm. In this case, the storm is a lot of guys, or several guys at least, who aren't ready to start the season, but you don't want to replace them with Jack Flaherty necessarily, because Jack Flaherty wants to pitch the whole season. You know, I actually was watching an interview with Rich Hill the other day, and for a brief second, my mind thought, well, Rich Hill still wants to pitch. There's no way he's pitching a full season. Let him, you know, sign him to pitch, you know, say, all right, you are in the rotation until Clayton Kershaw's back, you know, or even less commitment until Shohei Ohtani's ready to start, you know, and if you pitch well, you know, we'll find a way to keep you. But, you know, Rich Hill might go for, at age 953 or whatever he is, he might go for all right, you are a stopgap until Shohei Ohtani's ready to pitch kind of deal, you know, at least to give him his 22nd straight year of pitching in the big leagues.
Yeah, I mean, we vaguely talked about him last year when the Dodgers needed innings, and, you know, that's still something that's in the realm of possibility.
I was strongly opposed to it last year. This year, I'm a little less opposed to it, just because it would be very, very short term and not expecting anything. So that's my my caveat for when I'm okay with Rich Hill, is if we don't expect him to do anything good at all. So,
yeah.
We do have a couple more questions. We'll come back and get to those. So thanks for making us your first listen, and please keep it locked on Dodgers. We are back. Thanks again for being here with us live on Monday evening. If you are, thanks for listening in your car on your way to work Tuesday morning, if that's what you're doing. However you take in Locked On Dodgers, we appreciate it, and we hope you will do it every day. Also, please become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. During the season, most of the time, off days, we will do a mailbag episode, and insiders always get priority on their mailbag questions. So join that group. It's just a few bucks a month, free 14-day trial. Subtext or Discord channel goes along with it, all that fun stuff. So jumping into our last couple of questions, our next one comes from our buddy Insider. Our last Insider question, our final question, comes from Twitter, but the last Insider question, our buddy Esteban from Whittier, he says, is CT3 inevitable, or is there a world where CT3 and Kiké can live in the same space? Or if we trade CT3, who else would be involved? Et cetera, et cetera. He says, what I'm trying to say is there a world where CT3 and Kiké are both on the team? I understand it's impossible, but I wouldn't mind hearing your thoughts.
It's not impossible, but it doesn't seem likely at all. If Kiké joins the team, you know, Chris Taylor might survive a couple weeks into spring training, but eventually something's going to have to happen. And, you know, we had an episode where we talked about James Outman and Miguel Rojas and Chris Taylor, and, you know, who's more likely of the three to get traded, or who makes the more sense to get traded. And I think if Kiké is going to be on the roster, CT3 can still be on it, but then Miguel Rojas won't be on it. Or, you know, they would go with no Pajes or no Outman and have Kiké be more of a outfielder against left-handed pitching, or whatever the case is. They would move stuff around. So I don't see that likely at all.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I've suggested in the past that they could do, is sign Kiké as soon as they have room on the 40-man roster once spring training starts, and then let the cards play out, because if there's going to be a potential trade market for Chris Taylor, it's going to be as guys get hurt in spring training or whatever. But also the Dodgers are one of those teams who could have an injury. And so, if Miguel Rojas was to get hurt, then suddenly there is room for both Taylor and Kiké on the roster. Or a handful of guys could get hurt and open up a spot on the Dodgers for Taylor to stay and have there be room. So when we've said many times, there's not really room for Kiké and Taylor on the roster at the same time. That's based on the assumption that everybody's healthy. And that is almost never a safe assumption with the Dodgers. Last year was a little bit better on the position player side. It was terrible on the pitcher side, but even last year, Mookie and Muncy both missed significant time. So yeah, if everybody's healthy, there's not room for both of them, but I don't think it's out of the question that they would sign Kiké and carry both of them during spring training while they wait to see what plays out and see if either a market develops for Taylor or an opening opens up on their own roster due to injury.
Yeah. All right. Last question presents hypothetical from Ismael Ruvida on Twitter. He says, assuming Roque and Snell are both signed to the Dodgers already, would you rather have Juan Soto and Gavin Lux or Tommy Edman, Teoscar Hernandez, Michael Conforto, Blake Trinan, Tanner Scott, Kirby Yates, and Ha-Seong Kim? We know that the Dodgers could do it all, but this is asking us to assume that you had to pick between one of the two.
Yeah, and I feel like this one is directed right at me because I've always been of the, I'm a big proponent of the why not both camp. And when I was advocating for the Dodgers to sign Juan Soto, people would always push back and say, no, it should be Teoscar Hernandez. And I was very much in the camp of why not both. But if we play along with Ismail's question, Roque, so it's basically Roque, Snell, Soto, and keeping Lux, or Roque, Snell, the Edman extension, Teoscar, Conforto, Trinan, Tanner Scott, Kirby Yates, Ha-Seong Kim. In that situation, I would take the latter. I do think, especially when you factor in that it costs a lot more money or a lot less money, even because Soto is, I think the Dodgers probably, if you look at, I guess it's probably about even per year, but then you have the 15-year commitment to Soto. So overall, a lot less expensive, the plan B. And yeah, I think that an outfield with both Teoscar Hernandez and Michael Conforto is better than an outfield with Juan Soto and, somebody else who's currently in the Dodgers minor league system playing left field. I think that's I like option B more in that regard. And obviously 3 really good relief pitchers is always a good thing. Ha-Seong Kim, I hope that he shows again at the big league level. I just have no idea if he's going to be able to hit very soon. And so I'm not allowing myself to get very excited about him just because I have no idea how his bat is going to translate or how quickly it's going to translate. I expect that at some point he will become a good major league hitter, but I don't have any idea if that'll be 2025 or 2028 or, somewhere, who knows when. But just the sheer bulk, the 3 good relievers and 2 good outfielders, I would take over Juan Soto.
Yeah. The rational answer is that, but the thought of, Juan Soto in this lineup just makes me want to take that side for the hypothetical and thinking of, you have to go almost half your lineup is a future Hall of Famer and, guys that you wouldn't want to face in any situation because they're good hitters, not just good power hitters or good contact hitters or, don't swing at too many out of the zone or whatever the case is. That's 4 legitimate, top 10, 15 hitters in baseball. If you drop Freddie down, maybe top 15, but whatever the case, I would take that, Dalton Rushing, you throw him out in left field and see what sticks. And then, I guess you would technically still have Edman, just not the extension. So he could play center. And in that realm, you get by with all the arms. And, in that scenario, I'm moving Dustin May to the bullpen. I'm, trying different guys out in different spots and then really counting on everyone coming back. It's a lot riskier play, But I mean, it would just be fun to have that hypothetical and talk about it and think about it.
Yeah, I still really like Juan Soto as a player, and I would have loved to have him on the Dodgers. But it's hard to give the Dodgers anything other than a pretty solid A for their offseason this year. They've definitely won the offseason, and some of that is by default, grading on the curve. A lot of teams have earned themselves a solid F this offseason, but nobody, even though the Mets have spent more money than the Dodgers have this offseason, nobody has done as much to improve their team as the Dodgers have. And they're coming off a World Series title, and that kind of commitment from ownership and the front office to, hey, we're going to win a World Series title, and then we're going to go out and make our team even better. Doesn't guarantee that they'll win it again in 2025, but it does guarantee that they're doing everything they can to win it. And as a fan, that's all I can ask for.
Yeah, the reality of the situation, without the hypothetical, the reality that we're living in is no complaints from me right now.
Yep. All right. I think that'll do it. You got anything else for today, Vince?
We had one question in the chat about Anthony Banda. Is he really that good, or was he just mostly used in low leverage? Curious on thoughts there, because we are counting on him right now, talking about, the 2025 bullpen, and, their bullpens are volatile, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's probably a mix. I mean, because Banda, he wasn't amazing. He had a decent strikeout rate, a decent walk rate. His FIP was 367. FIP is a decent way. ERA is not something you should ever look at for a reliever, because they come in so often with other guys' runners on base, or, they leave with their own runners on base, but whether they score is up to a different guy. Not nearly as reliable. But, I when I think of Anthony Banda, I have him down there with Ryan Brazier as the two bottom relievers currently on the roster. I think Banda will be a guy who gets, if you have a team that has a couple lefties stacked in a row, Anthony Banda would be the guy who gets those guys in the sixth inning, not in the ninth inning. But I do think he showed a lot of potential. He had his best year in a while. In fact, his best year in 5 years, really. Probably his best full season ever. And I think it's not a coincidence that came with the Dodgers. They're pretty good at getting the best out of their guys. And so that's kind of my thoughts. I think Banda, I think he's definitely, when you talk about all these guys who could be a closer on any team, Anthony Banda is not one of those guys, but I think he's definitely a solid part of this bullpen mix.
Yeah. He didn't have a lot of leverage. You look at leverage stats. It says 9 games as a leverage reliever. And those games had a 1.13 ERA, 11 strikeouts, 8 innings pitched. His clutch stats on Fangraphs are positive. But you got to think about the Dodgers had him in the bullpen the entire postseason and through multiple bullpen games, and won some big games with those bullpen games, and he was in that. So if game 4 of when you're one loss away from getting out of the league is in leverage, that's pretty much leverage as leverage as it could be. And he got through it. So.
Yep. All right. Well, that'll wrap it up for us today. Thank you all for being here with us live. Good group, good chat. We appreciate you. Thank you all for your questions. Remember, if you want to get in on these insider questions, just go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. Become a Locked On Dodgers insider. Get a priority on our mailbags and a lot of other perks. It's pretty fun, so check that out. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching and listening to make it easier on yourself to become an everydayer. Be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the 2 24/7 streaming channels on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at VinceSense91. I'm on Twitter at Snidog. Both of our DMs are open over there. You can also email us, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or send us a voicemail or a text message to 323-863-LOCK 5625. We are here every weekday morning. We hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have a good one.